Apple TV Plus Servant Season 2, Episode 10, Season Finale was titled Josephine. An unexpected arrival threatens to tear Dorothy and Sean apart, leaving Leanne defenseless. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my last recap, breakdown, and review of Apple TV Plus Servant Season 2, Episode 10, Season Finale, which was titled Josephine. There was some good things to be said about this episode, some questionable things, but also what can we expect for Season 3? We're going to break it all down in this spoiler discussion, but before we dive into it, make sure you all are following me on all my other social media accounts, which you can find those links in the description below. If you are new to the channel, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. It will mean the world to me if you all can like and share this review. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate all the support. And in the comments, look, before we even get into this review, I thank you all for tuning in every single week. There's some great YouTubers that cover this show as well, and I appreciate you guys coming in every week, discussing the show, your pros, your cons, your theories. I have such a great time covering it. I'm going to miss the show, but hopefully we'll get a Season 3 maybe by the beginning of next year. We'll see, but again, just leave your thoughts in the comments. Let's continue the conversation down there. Your pros, your cons of not only this episode, but as a season. Let's talk about Season 2 as a whole. Let me know which seasons you prefer more, Season 1, Season 2, and of course, what are your theories for the new season coming, hopefully next year. Let's talk about it all in the comments below. So you have Ishana Knight, who wrote and directed this episode. I like her as a director, seeing what she did in episode 3, I believe, which was titled Pizza, and knowing that she also has written other episodes this season. I like this. I like her sensibility. I like the way she directs. I like the way she tells the story. So I was really intrigued to see her direct and write this finale. And I'll just say it right up top. Her direction was fantastic. There were some questionable things in the script. There were some things that I wish would have played out differently. But as a whole, I think this season has introduced us to another Knight, M. Knight, his daughter, and her sensibilities and her directing maybe other projects. And of course, hopefully she'll be back for Season 3. But I was very impressed by her direction, the tension, Josephine, just the look of that character and how she was just a force of nature coming to the Turner's house. So there's a lot to be said about this finale. Did it fulfill all of my expectations, answer all of my questions? No, but it sets up a third season, which we'll talk about in this breakdown in regards to the pacing of this show, the restraint that they have in regards to they can give us answers, but they choose not to. Obviously, it's a show. They obviously want to continue to build. It's a slow burn, obviously, but there's a way to do that without making the audience kind of feel shortchanged, and we'll talk about it here. But overall, as the finale goes, I'm happy with the direction. I'm intrigued to see where things head, but I wished it would have stuck the landing as much as Season 1's finale did. But we'll discuss that as we go on in this review. But again, let me know just your general take on, did you enjoy this finale? Were you on the fence about it? Did you hate it? Are you going to come back for Season 3? Let's go ahead and start that conversation in the comments. So let's get into this recap here. As the episode opens up, immediately after the events of last week, we see Leanne is holding the doll, the Jericho doll. And as I had mentioned in my review last week, in regards to her having that conversation with Dorothy, as Dorothy was showing her that she was just on the verge of taking her own life, and she tells Leanne, yes, I'm willing to die because I don't have my son with me. So that spoke a lot to Leanne, because she sees, okay, she's cruel, she's cold-hearted, she's abusive, but she's a loving mother, at least in the eyes of Leanne, and it looks like she was going to recreate Jericho with this doll, as we'll talk about that later in this episode. But as we see, she sees the woman in black making her way to the Turner's house. As we cut to that scene, we see the woman in black. She reveals herself. She introduced herself to Sean as Aunt Josephine. Now, very interesting, biblically speaking, and in the Bible, and when I used to go to church, hey brother, hey sister, but they call themselves aunts and uncles. Now, I'm not as religious as I used to be. I don't know all the different verbiage. Of course, this is fictional, but the idea of this cult and the reason they call them aunt and uncles is very interesting. But nonetheless, she introduces herself as Aunt Josephine, and she has a gift for Leanne. It is a Betamax player. Sean asks, where's George? Where's Aunt May? As she informs him that they are no longer involved. And she tells Sean, she reminds Sean, very similar to Uncle George did, you can trust me. As Roscoe says, you can trust them. They're willing to help you. which again, we'll talk about things that I wish would have maybe been more involved in this finale. A Roscoe appearance, maybe the straw-like figure, the detective of Reyes. I don't know where she's at. Julian and everything that happened last week. Again, there's a lot of negative things that I wish would have happened in this finale. We'll get to that a little bit later as I digress. But going back into the recap, she walks in, she sees Dorothy, she refers to Dorothy as the warrior, trying to work her way into Dorothy's goodwill. We have this conversation on the couch where Dorothy's sitting next to Josephine, and she tells her, this must be so confusing. No one should bear this such weight. And it almost is like Josephine, again, she's almost doing the reverse of what we've seen Dorothy do many times this season, as she kind of maneuvers her way into people's hearts of putting on the charm with Uncle George, put on the charm for Leanne. We've seen Dorothy do that. So it was really kind of interesting to see the role reversals of sorts as she continues to kind of talk to Dorothy about the situation, saying that she deserves to have peace and to kind of let go of this burden that she's been carrying on her chest, right? She mentions to Dorothy that she's there to get Leanne because Leanne is in desperate need of help, and it's a part of their customs. And we'll talk about those customs a little bit later, but Dorothy agrees to allow her to see Leanne for about 15 minutes. But in exchange, I'll give you Leanne if you give me Jericho, as we see in this moment here. Cut to Leanne being armed with an object. She's ready, like, who is this downstairs? She's afraid of Josephine as she tells Sean, do not leave me alone with her, which should just tell you as an audience member, number one, I don't know if we'll get any more Josephine-like characters, but whether it be Aunt May, Aunt George, Uncle George, those lesser saints characters that they bring into the episodes are very creepy, and I think this is the number one creeper here. Josephine had some vibes. The woman in black, she was just very mysterious, and I like the way that Ishana kind of directed that actress and the way she carried herself, the way she spoke, the cadence of her voice, the kind of, again, just the welcoming nature, but the creepy nature at the same time. So this Josephine actress was pretty great in this episode. But again, going back to Leanne being afraid, we see that Leanne and Josephine is now in her attic, her place where she's done a lot, right? She's remodeled the place. She's recreated her mother of sorts. She's eaten a cake with the baby in it, which that ritual really hasn't been explained. She's also had a couple things happen with a couple guys, whether it be Toby and making love to Julian. So the attic is Leanne's space, no doubt, right? But we see her get asked a question by Josephine, what do you want, Leanne? As Leanne tells her that, and this was very surprising, at least for me, she says she just wants to stay with the Turners. But it makes more sense. The more you think about this episode, the more you think about this season, Leanne, she's been tortured. She's been abused by Dorothy, right? But in a way, I don't want to say Stockholm Syndrome, but in the way, and I mentioned it when we saw that episode when she was recreating her mother and seeing the parallels between her mother's abuse versus Dorothy, it's just kind of like she's used to it, right? She looks at this abuse as like a matter of love, maybe, and she's kind of accepting Dorothy like, oh, she's just being down on me. She's being hard on me because she wants her son back, but she also cares for me, right? It's very, again, the whole, and I mentioned it many times in these reviews, the pendulum with Leanne, right? You feel bad for her, and she does some evil things. You feel bad for her. So it's why I really am latched on to this show. It's the gray characters. Sean, Dorothy, Julian, Leanne, so on and so forth. It's just like you can't really define these characters, which can be frustrating, no doubt, but it also leaves a lot of mystery with these characters. I just love that as I kind of go on this side tangent here. And again, there's a lot to be said about this show that's positive, but we'll get to the negatives here in a little bit. But nonetheless, we see that Josephine tells Leanne, they don't love you. You don't need to be here because they don't love you the way you think they love you. So then cutting back to seeing Josephine going to Dorothy and giving her what she promised as she gives her the pajamas of Jericho. And as we kind of see this creepy moment taking place, we see Sean notices that the door is closed. He can't get in. And at this point in the episode, it's more focusing on the Josephine switching into Leanne in these rituals, but it is very interesting that the show just continuously lingers this thing that Dorothy has yet to be confronted about what happened last year. It happened it was a couple times this season, and in particular in this episode where Sean, Leanne, there was moments where it was almost going to slip out, but she still has this hope. But the hope has paid off, as we'll get to that big moment in this episode. We see Josephine now has the box in her possession that Uncle George had to go on with the ritual that we will get get into here in a second, and let's just get right into it. We get this reunion ritual video plays. We're introduced to, again, the aunts and the uncles. We meet Uncle Frederick, and he is going to show Leanne how to get back to the light. Step 1 being invocation. Hurt the flesh while listening to music that reminds them of something that was important to them. Separate yourself from this false feeling, as we see the members of the Lesser Saints choking themselves, beating themselves in the face. I mean, doing all this stuff. To me, there were moments in that video that was kind of like, it's that balance of this show is not a flat out comedy, right? But they have these awkward comedic beats, and sometimes they don't work for me. Like last week, I didn't really enjoy the whole Courtney with the K and the family drama stuff, but that video, that homemade, ritual video, was slightly funny, but also very creepy. This show balances that line, whether it be Sean cooking food that looks scary and delicious at the same time, and the same thing could be said about this video. It has some funny moments, the way that these Uncle Frederick, and I can't remember the young lady that he was demonstrating on, but they have that funny kind of like first day at work type of video or training video, but then it's very dark and sinister what we're seeing these people do. So we got step number 1 into step number 2. Step 2 being consecration, separation of the soul from the body. Blind them, open the flesh with a heated blade, and the soul will be free from the body and will be reunited with God. So again, that whole situation going on. We now see him pretending to blind the person he was demonstrating on, cutting their flesh. We're going to see that ritual a little bit later in the episode, but I'm just thinking in my head, this is just crazy. Again, we haven't gotten the full understanding of the Lesser Saints. Are they guardian angels? What's their whole ordeal? That was something that was left on the table this season, which I hope they explore more of that. Who is the straw-like figure? Who did Roscoe run into? I want these answers, and I hope we get it in episode 1 of season 3, because we didn't get it in this episode. But we cut to Dorothy slowly starting to remember, going back to this homemade video. The last step was emancipation must burn the body, important to complete in a faster manner, or the death may not take. When one goes bad, there is no turning back. So again, these demonstrations, this ritual is insane, and we see it come to life a little bit later in this episode. But let me know your take on this religious video homemade. Is it something you guys want to explore more in future episodes? Do you want to see more of these? Are we going to get Uncle Frederick make an appearance? Let me know just your thoughts on that creepy tape. Did you have a good laugh? Were you scared? Let me know if you enjoyed that moment. So we see Josephine ask Leanne why she left, and she tells her she wanted to help Dorothy, and she asks her, well, did you help her? And we see Leanne say yes, which she does, right? Especially by the end of this episode. But we see Josephine tells Leanne, as we've seen Uncle George and many others in the Lesser Saints say, you're only meant to serve one purpose, and you're meant to serve him. Again, who is him? Why haven't we met this character quite yet? This straw-like figure, is it a real human being? Is it some type of religious dark demon? Is it God himself? Only time will tell in future episodes. We see Leanne reciting this prayer in front of Josephine in regards to letting all the earthly possessions go. And then when it comes to forgetting Dorothy Turner, Leanne doesn't want to do this. As she tries to leave the room, she doesn't want to do this because Dorothy is very important to Leanne, as we know from season 1, as we know from this episode, as we know for this entire season. She looks at her like a mother, which is very important. So we see Josephine does one of the steps, right? She blinds or temporarily blinds Leanne, as we see that she's running in the house. We see Josephine inflicting pain on herself, which I don't remember that being a part of the ritual. Maybe it was something to do with her ritual that she's done in the past. We see again at this point, Sean is now having this conversation with Dorothy at the door, as Dorothy at this point is wrapping the clothes of Jericho up to make a noose to kill herself, which we've seen last week, and it continues this week as she just is losing hope that she's going to never see Jericho again. We have this conversation, and we honestly see, to me, the most earnest moment that we've gotten from Sean this entire season, maybe this entire series. As he tells Dorothy, he speaks from the heart. Okay, if you leave, what does that mean for me? Which is a bit of a selfish thing to say in that moment, right? When someone, and not to get too morbid and dark, but if someone's at that point, right, they're at the footsteps of taking their own life, him bringing himself, it speaks to the character, right? It speaks to these characters in general, Sean, Dorothy, you name it in regards to the selfish nature of these characters. He says, what am I going to do if you take your own life? And he puts, I mean, it works, right? She eventually doesn't do it, but it just speaks to these great characters. It just speaks to again, their selfish nature. Again, it worked because again, Dorothy's not going to take her own life. Let's just be honest. She's too about herself. She's too selfish of her own self to take her own life. So it's just, again, just shows these complex, layered characters that I really enjoy. But again, he convinces her not to take her life. Back to Leanne, who at this point is captured by Josephine. They're doing the ritual continues. She's at this point, she's blinded. She's been stabbed. She stabs her in the arm, which was gruesome. Again, the directing in this episode was pretty fantastic, pretty spot on, really great, creepy, scary vibes. We get the very interesting moment here as it seems like the ritual is going to take place. She's going to throw Leanne's body in the basement, which again, we've been talking about it all season, the significance of the basement, which didn't ultimately play out in a certain way, right, for Leanne, but it definitely played out for Josephine as we get Dorothy coming in, saving the day. She hits Josephine over the head with a shovel. And I love how the tables have turned, how Dorothy was inflicting pain on Leanne, the whole 2 a.m. abuse, the grabbing her by the hair, beating her up, all that stuff. But she saves her daughter in a sense, or at least that is how Leanne sees it as she saves her. And this was just, speaking of horror, this was a trope that I was like, I've seen it a million times in slasher films. Scream being one of them, right? As Randy says, never say I'll be right back. As Leanne, or I should say Dorothy tells Leanne, I'm gonna go get Sean, I'll be right back. Like, what the hell? Dorothy, pick her up on her feet and you both get out of the goddamn basement. But no, we got to have the suspense, right? As we see this kind of take place, Leanne is laying on the floor and she says to Josephine, see, I told you she cared about me like a mother. Very important line there. As we see at this point in time, again, more tropes from horror films. I don't know what the hell Sean was doing outside, number one, but nonetheless, he's outside doing something randomly, kind of a convenience for the plot, right? She goes to get Sean. They go in the basement. Well, I should say before we even get to that point, we get, again, tropey Jason, Michael Myers, Ghostface killer. Josephine isn't dead. She's not unconscious. She wakes up as Leanne, who gets up at this point again, is just like, this was frustrating. I've seen this in a million horror films. Why don't you just walk up the stairs instead of going to the fire? It ended up working to her advantage, and also it speaks to the basement working to her advantage in that pit. She burns the knife. Josephine comes up behind her. They have a scuffle. She's starting to choke Leanne. Her veil comes up, which is a big moment because we see that she has cuts and scars all over her face, alluding that she has had this same ritual done to herself. She's lost a life. She was lost at one point, and she had these exact same rituals done to her. I wonder if Aunt May did it, if someone else did it, Uncle George, who knows? But nonetheless, we see this whole thing play out. Her veil's on the floor. She goes to get it. This is a really awesome moment because all that tropey, stupid stuff that we got just minutes before then, we get a moment which was a nice payoff. We see Leanne says to Josephine, vanity is a sin, and she stabs her in the eye with the burnt knife, which was a great moment. I'm not gonna lie, I was cheering at the moment. That was a movie theater moment. I was in the crowd like, yeah, Leanne taking her eye back, an eye for an eye of a sense, right? Because she blinded her, now she's literally stabbing her in the eye. I thought it was a really cool moment. But we see again, Dorothy has got Sean. They go from outside to inside. They can't find Leanne. They're looking around the house. Dorothy tells Sean what Leanne told her in the basement, which was a big moment because she tells Leanne she wanted to make it seem that he's not alive, but he is. I promise you, I'm going to get, Jericho, your son, back, which, that made Leanne happy. And or Dorothy happy. I'm thinking to myself, like, please don't end this like this. Please don't end it where we're just having Dorothy be on this hope that Jericho's going to come back. But they give us a bit of a payoff here. As the episode wraps up, we see Sean and Dorothy. Sean is going to tell Dorothy what happened a year ago. He's going to tell her the truth. But Dorothy has the baby monitor in her hand. She starts to hear someone singing. We see Sean and Dorothy make their way to Jericho's room. We see Leanne's holding something. We assume it's a doll, but she's singing. She turns around. It's Jericho. It is Jericho. As I had alluded to many weeks ago, alluded to last week, Leanne wants to help her because she sees her in this weird, twisted Stockholm Syndrome abuse, power of abuse. She loves me type of abuse. She brings Jericho back. She even says to the Turners, we can now be a family, which Sean and Dorothy kind of look at each other like, we'll talk about that later. We got Jericho back as they're happy and excited. As the episode kind of wraps up, we get a really kind of cool voiceover, really kind of creepy voiceover as well, as Leanne is saying, you know, she's scared of herself sometimes. She can feel the dark thing getting bigger. But she's tried and been told that she's wrong and she's been doing wrong, but maybe this is who she is. As we see the lights in the house go off, the neighborhood lights go off, and she's talking to someone. As the camera kind of pans, she says to the person behind the wall, as we find out, that she knows they're coming for her, but don't worry, she'll be ready. As the camera pans, behind the wall is the burnt body of Josephine. As Leanne says, killing her will start a war. So look, as I said, this is a really long review. Bear with me here. This was the finale. You guys knew this was going to be a long, in-depth breakdown with my full thoughts, but look, the things I enjoyed about this episode was the direction. I love the payoff of Leanne, taking out Josephine with a knife. I love the moment that Jericho's back because we don't have to wait another year to see what the hell is going to go on with Jericho. It's been building up to this moment, and I felt like that was a nice payoff for this very season that was kind of up and down, and we'll get to my overall thoughts of the season. But as the finale goes, pretty satisfied. As far as things that was left to be undesired or unanswered questions, okay, we still don't know who the Lesser Saints are, who they worship, what they're about, Roscoe being converted. Aunt May, will she come looking for Uncle George, who we don't know if he's just off the table for good? Is he dead? Is he wandering somewhere? Is he going to be risen back? We don't know what's going on there. Officer Reyes, I made my theory a couple weeks ago that maybe she's a part of the Lesser Saints, and who knows, she might be back next season, but we didn't get any follow-up with that character. Julian dying and coming back to life and saying that he saw Jericho. Okay, is he a believer now? Is he going to be converted to the Lesser Saints? Next time we see him, it would have been nice to get some closure from that character. And just kind of, again, what is Leanne? She's a servant, but what does that mean entirely? Again, are they guardian angels? I know somebody mentioned in the comments last week, maybe she's the Antichrist. Who knows? Again, I love not getting all the answers, because if that's the case, we wouldn't get multiple seasons of this, really well-directed show, this show that deals with drama. I should say trauma, deals with denial, deals with grief, deals with covering things up to protect your loved ones, covering yourself up for selfish natures. It's dark, it's sinister, it's supernatural. It has all those elements that I like, but there are just things that I wish the show would just kind of move things along. Maybe we don't need 10 episodes next season, right? Maybe we need 6 episodes, maybe 35, 45-minute episodes to really flesh things out and not just move things along at a very slow pace, right? I mean, again, it's viewership, and Apple TV Plus wants you to come in every single week. But again, this season, I should say, just kind of overall thoughts of the season, it wasn't as good as the first season. Again, the benefit of the first season is obviously the mystery box. Like, okay, what is Leanne? How did this kid come back to life? Figuring out what happened to Jericho when he, died in the car. All that stuff played out so well because it was the first time we're being exposed to these characters in a situation. In episode 2, or season 2, I should say, it took a while for this season to really kind of get going. I think for me, it was episode 3 that really kind of kicked off this season. I feel like episode 1 and 2 was more of like a pay or kind of like an epilogue to season 1. And we finally got into season 3 again, or say season 2, 3 episodes in. And then there were some episodes in the middle of the season that was kind of clunky and very slow paced. And then we kind of wrap up. Last week was pretty good. This week was solid, but it was just a roller coaster, right? So I'm hoping that season 3 predictions, maybe lesser episodes. I know they probably won't do that, but even if they give us 10 episodes, give us some answers, man. Let's stop with this slow pace, meandering movement of the show. Again, you don't have to give us everything in episode 1, but let us know more about the Lesser Saints. Introduce characters, give us a wrap-up with characters. Officer Reyes, you have a moment with Julian dying. What does that mean for the character? Not seeing him in the finale was a bit of a letdown. If you have a big moment, have a payoff, right? So I hope that season 3, give me more of M. Night. Give me more of his daughter. Give me some other great creatives that have been doing a great job with this show. And let's get things going, right? But nonetheless, 30-something minutes later, I would say that this isn't as good as the first season. There were some great episodes this season. The finale was satisfying to a certain extent, but there are still some untied, unanswered questions that will lead into a season 3. So speaking of season 3, I'll be back. I'm invested in the show, 20 episodes in, 2 seasons in, and I have such a great time talking about the show with you all. So I'll be back whenever this show is, and I hope you all will return. But again, let's talk about it in the comments. Your pros, your cons about this episode, your thoughts, your theories of this particular singular episode, your thoughts of the entire season, episode, season 2, season 1, which one do you prefer? And what do you all want to see in season 3, right? What are the predictions you all have? Let's talk about it all in the comments. As always, guys, it's been an honor covering the show with you every single week. We did it last year, or should say 2 years ago. We've done it this year. We'll do it again. And I cover a lot of other TV shows, if you all don't know. Besides Apple content, I cover Disney Plus content, HBO Max, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, you name it. So if you love TV, this is the place to be. If you love movies, this is the place to be. If you love having great conversations about the things that we geek out about, MCU, Marvel, Star Wars, make sure you all check out my other content. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell. That way you don't miss any of my other content. Again, thank you for watching these reviews. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you on the next video.